I've just been thinking, that there seems to be, because in large part because of your influence, and then younger guys like me who in the last few years have come to the light and seen the goodness of things that you've been faithfully teaching for 40 years. And now we're coming on board and amplifying your efforts, probably also getting you in trouble. I think I've gotten you in trouble a couple of times. Cross-politic, right? The young guys, I feel like you get yourself in trouble, and then a good 90% of the trouble is like a younger guy who's in your orbit saying that Baptists are the cause of transgenderism,
Right.
something like that.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. And, and I've noticed just admiring from a distance that the way, I mean, you could throw a guy like me who gets, who says something and quotes you, but says it a way that you actually wouldn't say it and gets you in trouble. You could throw us under the bus, but I think that you do a good job not exasperating spiritual sons, so to speak. So I'm grateful for that.
Right.
But all that being said, guys like me, young guys, have hopped on board the patriarchy train. And a lot of that because of your influence and a few other guys. But it seems in my assessment that this new resurgence of patriarchy has some clear doctrinal distinctions and methodological distinctions from the patriarchy of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the way that the Duggars might have done it, or the Pearls, or certainly some distinctions with Bill Gothard and some of his teachings. What do you think some of those distinctions are? How have you seen patriarchy, that world that you were ministering during that time? How have you seen it good? How have you seen it go bad? What do you think?
Yeah. So this is really an interesting subject, because we're dealing with a cultural moment, dealing with hundreds of thousands of people. And consequently, definitions shift and change over time. So when feminism first became a thing in our culture generally, and then right on schedule, maybe 5-10 years afterwards, evangelical feminism became a thing. The world's doing something. Let's all discover that this is what the Apostle Paul meant all along.
Right.
So evangelical feminism started to get traction back in the 70s, and there were some people starting to articulate that. At that time, the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood and the response to it from evangelicals was that they came up with the name complementarian. Okay. Right. So, and complementarianism at that time was emphasizing that men and women are equals before God, but they have distinct complementary roles. Okay. Now, I have no objection whatever to that definition. Men and women are equal before God, and they do have distinct complementary roles. So thus far, everything's great. And when it started out, it was an answer to or response to a pushback to feminism. And that was all to the good. Okay. But as time went on, and you're dealing with more and more people, I would say that you have the complementarian world grew. All right. And as it grew, it developed a right wing and a left wing. Okay. Right. And I would say left wing complementarianism is simply right wing egalitarianism.
Right.
Right. So left wing complementarianism started to mush into egalitarianism because they started to cede territory that they ought not to have ceded. So, such as restricting your debate to the pulpit and to decision making in the home. The husband right. is the head of the home. At the end of the day, after much egalitarian discussion, with the husband, it sort of breaks the tie, kind of like the right. vice president in a tie vote in the Senate. So there's that. And then we can't let women open the Word of God in the pulpit to a mixed audience on Sunday morning.
So the husband becomes like the vice president,
right?
A joke of a role.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so that left-wing complementarianism is simply egalitarianism. In the complementarian world, there are people who still call themselves complementarian that I think are fine Christians and understand the scriptures, and for various social, cultural reasons are more comfortable with the term complementarian than they are with the term patriarchalism, because we're dealing with many people. The patriarchal world. So I would call myself an advocate of the patriarchy. I'm a defender of that which the egalitarians want to smash. They want to smash the patriarchy, and I want to defend the patriarchy. And I want the leadership of men and the gifts and calling of men to be in evidence in more places than just the pulpit and the final decision-making vote in a family discussion. I think it should come out in things like men and women's role in combat and war, in business, in just general cultural things. So I'm happy to call myself an advocate of the patriarchy, but men and women are sinners wherever they go. So if they adopt complementarianism, at some point, some people are going to start sinning with that term, right?
Right.
And the same thing is true of the patriarchy. When you say, I'm an advocate of the patriarchy, does that mean I'm an advocate of everything that anybody might do under the banner of patriarchy? Well, of course not. I've seen some really obnoxious behavior on the part of some men who would call themselves advocates of the patriarchy. And one of my interests is to not let them represent what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that means that if I'm going to inhabit the realm of the patriarchy, then we have to be diligent to police our own. So there are certain things that we must do to guard the perimeters of this world, so that it doesn't turn into a joke of a term.
All right, hold up. You're not going to want to miss this. I'm going to tell you exactly how our spring 2024 conference is going to go down. Here's the title of the conference: Blueprints for Christendom 2.0. Subtitle: 7 Doctrines for Ruling the World. We're going to have 7 primary sessions covering each of these doctrines for ruling the world righteously. Number 1, Reformed Confessionalism. That's going to be Pastor Doug Wilson preaching on that topic. Then we've got Covenant Theology with Pastor Brian Sauvé. Then we've got Biblical Patriarchy with Pastor Michael Foster. Then we've got Presuppositionalism with Dr. Joseph Boot. Then we've got Kuyperianism, All of Christ for All of Life, where we're going to welcome Pastor Doug Wilson back for a second session. Then we've got General Equity Theonomy. We're going to have Dr. Joseph Boot come and do a second session on that topic. And then lastly, we'll have Pastor Dale Partridge on postmillennial eschatology. In addition to these 7 sessions, we're also going to have not 1, but 2 live podcasts. On the first day of the conference, that's Friday, March 1st, we're going to have a live Theology Applied podcast. I'll be on the stage hosting the discussion with Douglas Wilson, Michael Foster, and Eric Kahn from It's Good to Be a Man. The topic is going to be all about biblical patriarchy. We're going to specifically be parsing out, distinguishing the biblical doctrinal differences between patriarchy and complementarianism. Again, that's Friday, March 1st, the first day of the conference, a live Theology Applied podcast on biblical patriarchy. Then we're going to have the next day, that's Saturday, March 2nd, a live Haunted Cosmos podcast. I'll be hosting this discussion with Brian Sauvé and Ben Garrett. We're going to be talking about the Nephilim. We're going to be talking about the Watchers. We're going to be talking about what creatures currently are living underneath the surface of the earth and chasms of the deep. It's going to be wacky. It's going to be weird, but it will also be thoroughly biblical and incredibly unhinged. So you're not going to want to miss these 2 live podcasts: Theology Applied on Friday, March 1st, the first day of the conference, on biblical patriarchy with Doug Wilson, Michael Foster, Eric Kahn, and myself. And then the next day of the conference, Saturday, March 2nd, a live Haunted Cosmos podcast with Brian Sauvé and Ben Garrett and myself on the Nephilim, the Watchers, and what lies under the surface of the earth. And then the conference will hold over for one final, the third and final day. That's going to be the Lord's Day, Sunday, March 3rd, where one of our speakers will be holding over to preach the Lord's Day sermon, and I'll be leading us in worship through the liturgy. So we've got 3 days, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2024, Blueprints for Christendom 2.0, 7 Doctrines for Ruling the World. You're not going to want to miss this conference. conference, our early bird rate is still available, but only for a very short period of time. We are ending the early bird rate on August 31st at 11:59 p.m. That will be the final chance to get into this conference at an affordable, cheap rate. All right, so go and take advantage of the early bird rate right now by going to rightresponseconference.com. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com to register for Blueprints for Christendom 2.0, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2024. Register today.